Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Week 5 Energy Society Talk. Today, we have Christoph Beuttler from Climeworks to talk about the business case, opportunities, and challenges associated with carbon dioxide removal. Christoph is from Climeworks, which is a leading Swiss company that focuses on commercial scale direct air capture. And he will discuss the business cases, scalability, and the opportunities and challenges associated with the technology, and also in view with the Paris Agreement. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Aline, and thank you for having me. And thank you for organizing these events. I'm really excited to introduce Climeworks and what we do. I will now share my screen and hope that you can see my presentation in a second. Can you see the slides?
Yeah.
Very good.
Good. Just before you start, just to let the audience know, if you have any questions or any comments, please just pop them in the chat box on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll take them at the end.
Very good, and I'll be probably a bit shorter in my talk, so we have more time for questions. Okay, so let's jump right in. I think I would want to start with why we do direct air capture. Obviously, it's quite a difficult task. We have to chase 410 parts per million, which is the current situation of CO2 in the atmosphere. And I think there are really three things. So our goal is at Climeworks to become climate relevant, and that means for us to be scalable and to become as big as it needs. And we really see three ways here, and one is in order to achieve what we need to achieve, we need to get to net zero. But it's no matter how good our technologies become, we will always have some residual or unavoidable emissions, and that is why we need direct air capture in the first place to neutralize those unavoidable emissions. Second reason is because it will be likely very hard to stay within our carbon budgets. So that's why we need then to realize net negative emissions. So the current plan is hopefully globally to arrive at net zero emissions in 2050. More and more countries are subscribing to that view. But that then also means we have to enter a period of net negative emissions thereafter. So we have to take more CO2 out of the air than we emit into it, and obviously arriving at these scales, we're talking between 6 and maybe 20 gigatons per year. Current emissions are about 40, is quite a challenge. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is we need to replace fossil carbon inputs into the system, for example, for fuels, but also for other materials, because it's obviously slightly pointless to take CO2 out of the air if you still pump fossil CO2 into the atmosphere. And we can help with all three of those. Maybe a bit about our company history before I go into our technology briefly, and then give you two examples of business cases. So if you count the years in the lab, we are probably about 15 years old. Jan and Christoph, who started this company, started this quite early in their studies, but officially we are founded in 2009 as a spin-off of ETH Zurich, and we had our first demonstration prototype in 2012, and then shortly after a strategic partnership with Audi. In 2014 we developed the modular collector that we are still kind of to this day are using, or at least the idea of the modular system. And in the really big year was 2017, where we had the world's first commercial DAC plant, and the world's first commercial DAC-S plant. So DAC-S is obviously storage. And from there on, it kind of grew rapidly. 2018 partnership with Coca-Cola, and already we have a product in stores since I think early 2019. So it's a mineral water you can buy here in Switzerland in the supermarket. And 2019 we became commercial on the DACS side, and we recently raised 110 million in our last round, which is the biggest investment into DAC ever. And currently we are working on our first large-scale DACS plant, which I'm going to show you in a bit. So currently, we are 120 employees, growing super fast. So for example, when I started about a good 2.5 years ago, I think we were around 40. And so we're constantly growing, and we need to, because we want to become bigger, and we need to become bigger, as I'm hoping to illustrate. Total investment is 145 million. And maybe one more thing we're really proud of is that, we developed our technology to run on sustainable or, low carbon or no carbon energy only. And as a result, we have a very low carbon footprint. So overall, cradle to grave, we have 10 to 5% life cycle emissions. And why am I telling you this? Because if you're in the business of taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, you better look at your own emissions and make sure that they're extremely low, because otherwise it would be slightly pointless. In terms of plants, I think, currently 15 plants are being built or are in the process of we're building our 16th. And what we are really proud of is that we have, plants in locations from Iceland to southern Italy, which is quite a wide range of climatic conditions, and that allows us to gather a lot of data and in turn, improve the process in the future and basically every day as we go along. So how does the technology work? I need to apologize, I'm not a technical person, but in very simple terms, what we have done is we have built a very specific filter that is highly selective and only reacts with CO2. So it only binds CO2. Obviously, we have to move a lot of air through these in order to pick the needle in the haystack, so to speak, to chase those 410 parts per million. So we need a bit of electricity to push that air through, or pull rather. And once the filter is saturated, we close the box, and then we heat it to about 100 degrees Celsius, and then the CO2 releases at a purity level of about 99.5%. And that is something we are really proud of, because other DAC technologies need to dissolve at 900 degrees. Then you need to burn natural gas, which then in turn you need to co-capture the fossil part of the CO2 that comes with burning the natural gas, and the whole process becomes a bit less efficient. And with this, we can run this entirely on renewable energy. And in our case, for the phase 2, we mostly use waste heat of other industrial processes. So things that come free, or energy that comes free anyway, or wouldn't be used in other ways. So at the beginning, I said we can do three things. Two I want to go into here. So the first business case we have, or we see, is that is what we call carbon dioxide removal or negative emissions. So we are super excited that we have developed a way with our partners in Iceland at Carbfix to take CO2 from the air, which is the part we do, and that gets combined with water. It can be salt water, it can be groundwater, depending on what you have available. And we pump it down at a geothermal power plant, from which we also obtain our energy. And in about 800 to 2,000 meters, it reacts with the pressure and the heat and the minerals in the basaltic rock, and it mineralizes. And so we get about 95% of CO2 mineralizes within 2 years. And obviously that is a very permanent and safe storage, or the most permanent and safest storage that you can imagine, if you basically turn the CO2, put it back where it came from and turn it into a stone or rock. And this is how this looks like in real life. So on the left side, you can see the power plant at Helscheide, and on the bottom right side would be our operations. On the top left, you can see the injection domes, and on the bottom right, you can see a bore core with the mineralized CO2, which is the white bit, or the white bits. So yeah, again, we are super happy to be able to have demonstrated this, and you know, after 2.5 years, we really can say it works, and it works well. And obviously, the geothermal power plant also captures their CO2 emissions, and has been for a longer time. So we have a lot more than just our data to verify the storage mechanism. Maybe you know, quickly, you want to go into the differences between CCS and DAC or CDR. So and they're often mixed, and I admit that DAC is not the best way to describe a removal, but it was before the days of that distinction. But so CCS is usually, or we see it as a fossil point source capture, where you then divert the fossil CO2 back down. So apart from the exception of BECCS, that's the case with most CCS projects. So you avoid an emission. Obviously, you have some residual emissions from the process, and what DAC does is we take it from the air, we store it underground, and I know that's obvious, and it's obviously obvious to you, but a lot of the times we get criticized that we could capture CO2 much more efficiently if we were to tap into a fossil or an off-gas or flue gas stream. But obviously, it's not the same thing. It does matter where the CO2 comes from, and to be carbon negative, it has to come from the air, and it has to end up in the ground or somewhere where it's stored permanently. Just want to make that clear. Okay, so yeah, this is this year's big news, and this is what we are really excited about. Is our new Orca plant. It also is a new generation of DAC technology. You can see a rendering here on the left-hand side. We'll also build that in Helscheide in Iceland, and it has a capacity of 4,000 tons, which is per year, which is not a lot, but it is more than all of our other plants combined, and it is a significant scale up for us. And it also is the largest DACS plant in the world once it's operational. And this new technology is a lot more efficient. We saved about 40% of steel per ton, and we think that this will be the go-to technology for the next couple of plants. It also looks a bit differently, and we also made an effort to design it to not just have an industrial look, but to kind of blend it into the landscape, which is important to Icelandic people, or Icelanders, I guess. Yeah, and on the right hand side, you can see the fabrication process, which is not yet fully automatic, but will one day have to be to further get costs down. And we hope this comes on tap early next year and runs for another 10 years at least. And we have already sold half of the lifetime capacity of this plant. So again, quite excited. So I guess in terms of business models, what we have done is in the past 3 years or so, we have worked towards creating a niche market or a market for direct air capture for both for CDR, so for removals, but also for niche products. So, for example, the plant you see on the bottom left delivers CO2 to Coca-Cola and a greenhouse for fertilizer. Then now we are moving into the scale-up phase with Orca, with the plant we're building now, and from that on we are going to move into mass production. So we hope to add roughly one order of magnitude every 2 to 3 years, and ultimately really try to achieve gigaton scale in the 2030s and 2040s. And we need to do that because we already know from the climate models that these volumes are needed in order to provide us globally with the amount of CO2 for products and also negative emissions that we need. So maybe a few quick remarks on other approaches. First of all, we're not saying that direct air capture is a silver bullet. We need everything. So we need, first of all, to stop emitting that much, and then find ways to take care of the unavoidables. And the question we get asked the most is, why don't you just plant trees? And the reason is, and I apologize, there's a number missing, but this is roughly 6.4 million square kilometers, or I think almost exactly. What we calculated is the amount of land that you need for afforestation. And to put it in simpler terms, so in order to achieve the scales that we need in the climate models, we need 3 planets of current tree coverage, and we only have 1. So I think what we can offer, and what other technologies like BECCS and enhanced weathering can also offer, is to make this smaller and therefore more feasible. So what we see is, this is a calculation to remove 8 gigatons per year, and we think we can do that roughly in the region of 16,000 square kilometers. And that includes the amount of renewable energy we need. So here we calculated with PV, and the PV footprint is about, I think, 97% of the total footprint. So it's mostly PV panels and then a few quite substantially some DAC plants. And I think this is really what we bring to the table. And with this, then we can alleviate the pressure on food systems and on agriculture, because we need to make choices with the arable land we have, and DAC you can build on non-arable land. And from what we see, it should also be possible to develop the amount of renewable energy that is needed to run this. And we also look constantly into, is there enough steel, is there enough of the raw materials we need to arrive at these scales, and we see that this is possible. Obviously, some industries that currently use a lot of raw materials will have to shrink, but these are probably industries that need to shrink anyway, because otherwise we won't make Paris at all. So I've mentioned this at the beginning. The other thing that we can do is, with our technologies, we are able to close the carbon cycle. I think one good example is fuels, and within that, a very good example is aviation. And if you look into the alternatives you have in aviation, you have direct electrification or hydrogen, and because of energy density and maybe also security, it is very unlikely, we think, that planes in the next decades will fly on either hydrogen or electricity, or at least long haul big large planes. So what you need to do is you need to find a way to create a CO2 based fuel without having the emissions. And the way to do this is, and we have demonstrated this this year in Germany, you take CO2 from the air, you then can combine it with green hydrogen, you can methanize it, And from there, you can start obviously building your hydrocarbon chain. Basically, you Fischer-Tropsch, and then you have a drop-in fuel that you can fill in any airplane or car if need be. And because you have taken the CO2 out of the air first, and once you burn the fuel, it enters back into the atmosphere. You have closed the carbon cycle and thereby theoretically achieved a zero emissions fuel. Obviously, the process is very energy intensive and has some residual emissions again. We estimate them to be at 15% if the CO2 is taken from the air. But you get pretty close, and obviously with a negative emission, you could even arrive at a real net zero emission for aviation. Also, these fuels burn a lot cleaner, so you have less other climate impacts that you have with fossil fuels. For example, NOx emissions or the little particles that are also problematic. And again, same picture emerges. So yes, you can also take CO2 from a fossil flue gas stream, but then arguably what you're doing is you can frame it in different ways. You can say you have a delayed emission, or you can say you reuse the CO2 once, but you're not creating that carbon cycle. And if you were to calculate that, you then would be roughly at 50% emission plus the 15% residual or process emissions. So you have a reduction of 35%, which is not the same as 85%, obviously. And in a net zero world would have to be then compensated again by a negative emission. So you rather start with the CO2 from the air in the first place. And I think, again, that is something that needs to be pointed out frequently, because it's not always clear why this is important. So maybe apart from the Coca-Cola case and apart from the niche markets like fertilizer for greenhouse, we have now built up a portfolio for larger markets where we can deliver CO2 as a raw material for organizations and companies to then make products from. We have developed carbon removal for organizations. If you want to be net zero as an organization, and with all the net zero pledges coming out, for example, by Microsoft, who have vouched to remove all their historic emissions, you cannot buy an avoided emission certificate. You really need to buy a removal certificate, and the only permanent way for removal is arguably things like direct air capture. So that's where we see a lot of growth. And obviously, if companies can do it, we can do it as people, and that's why we have launched our web shop last year, where we already have several thousand pioneers who use this service and are willing to pay a bit more to help us develop this technology, and we remove CO2 from the air in their name. Maybe to get into the kind of strategic political discussion, if we look at it from an economics point of view, but also from a view of scales, and compare mitigation, BECCS and DACCS, which we all need. So BECCS here stands for bio-based CDR solutions, and direct air capture stands obviously for technical solutions. So the way this should play out is mitigation should become more expensive over time after an initial kind of dip because of learning, because you pluck the low-hanging fruits first. And bio-based solutions should become more expensive over time because of supply and demand. There's only so much biomass, and once we go down the learning curve, that law kicks in, and there will be competition for that biomass. And like solar panels, DAC should behave in a different way. It's currently very expensive, roughly 600 to 800 per ton cost, but if we can keep on expanding in these larger markets we build, we can have automated mass production, we can bring down capex, we can bring down opex through better processes, and also through falling renewable energy costs. And we think this can be viable somewhere between 100 and 200 francs, dollars over the next decades, or in the next decades, if there's either strong political will, or if companies or individuals with a sense of a strategic sense or pioneering sense keep buying these removals. And yeah, that's why we are super happy that that things are moving in politics too. So the EU is moving on the bio-based solutions, but also on technical ones. DG Klima is working on a CDR certification scheme to be finalized in early 2023, similar possibly to the EU ETS. In the past 3 weeks, China has committed to net zero in 2060, and they're also moving in that direction. And then you have these islands where you have quite high prices already, like the low carbon fuel standard in California, where it's already at $200 per ton, and that's even, you can combine that with another tax credit, the 45Q, which brings it to $250. And now the certification bodies like Gold Standard and Verra are also moving into removal markets and include, or starting to include, bio-based solutions and also direct air capture. And yeah, we are really happy about these things. And if you ask me 2 years ago, I would never have thought that this would be possible in this short amount of time. But it's really also very much needed, because we have 3 decades at the most to basically completely redesign the way we run our societies, at least around carbon. So with that, I thank you and happy to take questions. Aline, I think you're still on mute. I can't hear you, or we can't hear you, rather.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for such an informative talk. And now we have a few questions coming in. So firstly, from Tom, that's about the life cycle CO2 emissions of 10 to 15% that you mentioned early in the presentation. So he's not quite sure, like, which exactly are you talking about?
Yep. Okay, so first of all, they are 10 to 5, not 10 to 15. But what we are talking about is, if you build these plants, you need steel, you need materials, and to make these materials, you have emissions. And then you have emissions from running the plants, because if you take everything into account, even if you use wind energy or solar, that also has emissions to build and run. They're very low, but they add up. And so we perform LCAs that look at the whole emissions over the lifetime of a plant, from making the raw materials to recycling the plant at the end. And then you can calculate what these emissions are, and then you can from that you can calculate what your net removal is. So if we have 5% residual emissions over the lifetime of a plant, and we have a 95% net removal efficiency. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And there's a second question from Tom. So how physically large is each of the units in the images that you mentioned? So the plants.
Yeah, it's a very good question, which I indeed forgot to mention. So the frames you see is a 40-foot container exactly, because we also need to build and ship thousands of them. So our unit is the 40-foot container. And in the second generation, it's really one 40-foot container that comprises of one of these layers, and they are stacked. And in the first generation of the technology, within each 40-foot container, you have 6 modules. And maybe, what you can use as a metaphor is each of these modules are the size of a large SUV, roughly.
Okay, thank you. And now we have a question from Nina regarding the PVs you talked about. So how does Climeworks deal with the inconsistency problem of solar power, especially when your projects span such a wide geographical range?
Yeah, so I did say we did use PV for that footprint calculation, and we don't use just PV. We use renewable energy and renewable energy that's available, right? In the Icelandic case, we use geothermal, and that is basically doesn't have the inconsistency problems of solar. But you're right. Depending on location, you need to think about a mix. So in Switzerland, it's usually hydro, which again doesn't have those problems. But yeah, there will be locations where you need to balance the inconsistencies either with multiple energy sources or with batteries. Yeah. But maybe if I can add to this. So what we do need, so 4/5 of our energy requirement is this waste heat, which then also comes, or heat, which is easier to produce in a constant flow, and it's only 1/5 that is electricity, which again makes it a bit easier. I wrote a paper on this. I think November 2019 in Frontiers, and you can find all the data there if you Google my name and Frontiers or DAC, and yeah.
Great, thank you. So another question from them. What is the cost per ton of CO2 that you have sold after Orca that product so far?
So there's a difference between cost and price. So cost, we are roughly 600 to 800 with a plant like Orca. Price is different because selling also costs money. And we have overheads that we need to take care of. So we sell on the web shop, we sell somewhere in the region of 1,000 or 1,075. And the reason is because we sell in very small tranches. So the subscriptions are, I think, around $9 per for the small one, and then 24 and 54. So, and they run monthly. So you have overheads for the payments and everything. So that's where we are with this. And then if you buy larger bulk, we sell at a slightly lower cost to companies like Stripe, etc.
Okay, great.
Not lower cost, lower price. Sorry, yeah.
So that's all the questions we have so far. So if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment box, and we'll answer them. So for now, if no other questions come in, I'll ask another question of my own. So, because it's mainly based in Europe, is the company's projects related to the EU emission trading system in any way?
No. The EU emissions trading system runs at currently, I haven't even looked for a while, so I'm guessing 20 euros per ton. So this is way too low for us. There's no way we can compete there. So we are very hopeful that the new CDR mechanism that is in development will reflect that it's harder to take the CO2 out of the air than to not emit, which is what the ETS is about. And we're really looking, all over the planet for these mechanisms that allow us to tap into the cost range where we are at the moment.
Great. I have a follow-up second part from them. So is the retail about $1,000 or euros per ton?
For individuals, I guess that's where it is on the web shop. Better for companies slightly lower at the moment. So we hope, imagine it's the 1990s and I'm talking to you about solar power. So it's crazy expensive, but we just started. And we hope that in a few years, the retail is maybe, 700, and the cost is 400, and then it really comes down. But yeah, this is the case at the moment. We have built a Tesla Model S. It works, it's nice, but it's still expensive, and we're trying to build a Model 3, I guess.
Okay, so another questions coming in there. So currently, the Science Based Targets initiative doesn't permit corporates to use offsets towards their targets. Do you think CDR offset credits should or will be allowed in the future?
Yes and yes. So we already can see that the discussion in the Science-Based Target Initiative is going into that direction, and we are hopeful that it will in the very near future. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. So, so that's all the questions we have so far. So if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the box. We will wait for a few. So while we're waiting, Christoph, would you like to kind of introduce your role in the company and what you are working on right now?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm responsible for policy, our scientific stakeholders, relations with our scientific stakeholders, and strategic communications. And I have a few roles outside the company, building up an initiative in Brussels called Negative Emissions Platform, and we really hope to contribute to new policies that work in the direction of getting us to net zero and to achieve that climate neutrality, or stick to the Paris Agreement, basically.
Great. Oh, okay. We just have Tom thinking this is really interesting. Thank you. And of course, we'll really thank you very much for this interesting talk. So we don't have any more questions coming in. So I guess we'll probably just end it for today. But if anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop them to Energy Society and we'll forward them to Christoph, and hopefully he will be able to answer them.
Yeah, I will do. Happy to. Thank you, Aline, and yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and I hope that was interesting. And yeah, I guess.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
For coming, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Oh wait, we have one more question coming in.
Yeah.
How is cooperation between the negative emission technology and DAC companies going?
Not sure.
So I guess they're referring to DAC with other companies, such as maybe kind of like carbon capture and storage and other companies.
Yeah. So yeah, so you mean other negative emissions technologies, presumably. So well, obviously we share the same interests with many of them, and we obviously work in the same space. We are in contact with all other DAC companies, and other companies like Drax. So in the UK we have launched. We are part of the coalition of negative emissions, and most negative emissions technologies are in that coalition, and so yeah, we try to work towards our common goal of establishing these markets and regulations, so we can one day arrive at a net zero UK, world, Europe. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, I hope that. Oh, there's a center bar. Seems to be a new negative emission consortium started in Britain recently, COP26.
Yeah, that's probably Mark out of Imperial. To be honest, these are now being started left, right, and center, and we're really happy about that. And I think we are in contact with most of them. So yeah, I also think COP26 next year is really important. The US will be back in, and I was in Poland and also in Madrid. You could already see that the events on negative emissions, we're growing, and we obviously hope that trend continues. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that answers Lynn's question. So if you have any follow-up questions, please type them in the box now. Okay, just to remind everyone, the next week we still have this talk, similar talks going on at Wednesday 5:30 p.m. So remember to tune in either on YouTube or Facebook. And another comment from Lynn: Biden has NET shown in his program. It's very exciting.
We are aware of that. Yeah, we're also pretty excited.
Yes. So I guess that wraps up this talk. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to drop them to Energy Society and we'll forward them to Christoph. And I think we should just wrap it up now.
Okay. Thank you, Aline. And yeah, if there are more questions, shoot them my way and I'll try to answer them. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next week.